Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our class today. We are so happy to have Jamie Valenti-Jordan here with us. And so, Jamie, I'm going to just turn it right over to you.
All right, sounds great. Well, I have this nifty-difty soundboard, so I might as well play some opening music here. So set the tone. Here we go. All right, there we go. Okay, so let me get the screen shared real quick, and we can jump right in. Yes, I promise I'll do an intro to myself here in just a second. All the amazing things that we are doing here. But today we're going to be talking about scaling your formulation. I'm going to go very quickly. This is a 2-hour presentation I've crammed into one that I've given for the last several years. So away we go. Okay, basic overview for today. Do a quick introduction to myself as to why you should bother listening to me. Then we'll get into kind of how product definition and product preservation play into our discussion around scaling. And then for many people, contract manufacturing comes up in the discussion as part of scaling. If that is not your jam, there's some extra hidden slides in there that you'll want to pull the presentation down and have a look at. That will be part of the package that goes out at the end. So with that, who am I? I've been in the industry for 20 years. I actually am a tech grad. I came through 2004 Kimmy. So I am definitely part of the community here. And I went all the way through, got my master's in food science and things like that. So in any case, been in the industry for a long time, worked with hundreds of brands, thousands of products, and millions of dollars in equipment. I just realized that's well stacked. Nice. Currently, I have three primary roles. I'm a food brand program manager at the Food Finance Institute, which is part of UW. If you're looking at my screen, it's that symbol up there in the corner, where I work with educating brands on how to make money in the food and farm sector. We all like that. All right. I'm also the executive director of Naturally Wisconsin, which is a group that helps support Wisconsin brands. Yeah, I'm kind of Wisconsin-centric right now, but it's being used as a model on how to roll out elsewhere in the country as well. I also have a consulting company I started 7 years ago that I'm the CEO of, providing technical and operational project support for commercialization, aka all the nerdy stuff. Also a certified food scientist. I have a patent in infrared peeling of tomatoes, which is all well and good. I can tell you one great way not to peel a tomato. And my primary skill set is on working on scaling up, specifically from bench to pilot and pilot to full scale. Designed and built plants based off of the work that I've done on the bench top. So lots to go over there, but let's jump right into it. Sorry, I am also fighting a cold this morning, so I'm high on NyQuil. So if you think this is entertaining, you should see me on a good day. Okay, so when we get started, we're looking at kind of defining our product formulation, which becomes the basis of how we scale it. We are going to be looking at the current state of the market, what do consumers need that they don't have. So we're doing multiple types of analyses. We're looking at the competitive assessment of what solutions to that problem are already out there, and where they sold, and the price point that they're at, because there may be a new spot for you to play, just based on being at a different location and a different price. And then there's also the category analysis. You don't want to be so micro-niched by saying I'm only going to sell within 50 miles of this particular location, such that there's not enough people to actually sell it to. It's a scenario I'm running into with a apple orchard out in the western states here, where they just literally don't have enough people to sell to, so they're having to look at a larger footprint with their products. And then you basically want to synthesize all those elements together to give yourself a reason as to why your product's going to be successful. This is important because you need to set your target market. Who are you going to be working with? What do they do? Where do they shop? This is about building a persona for your target consumer. If you've ever heard anybody talk to you about that, that is critical for helping to understand not just what product you're going to present, but how are you going to sell it, how are you going to market it, how are you going to present it, and all of those things. The reason why we need to know all of that is to know how we're going to get our money back out of our inventory back in the form of cash. It is actually important to consider all of these different elements when you are starting to even design what product to go to. Now, we all have products in this room. It's already too late, but it's never too late to go back and relook at it and make sure that your product's well aligned. What you may find is that there's an entirely untapped market from a target consumer perspective that would want to engage with your product. For example, I worked with a cactus water. Yes, I said cactus water, but they basically put cactus water in a can, and they had one use case, and they were going to retail and everything like that, and I forced them to stop and say, when are people actually consuming your product right now? Turns out their C-stores were off the charts, the convenience stores. What had happened is that they had accidentally ended up in a C-store, and it turns out that it was a value-added trade-up from a bottled water to get cactus water instead. And so they went and pivoted their entire brand, relaunched into C-stores, and have been crushing it ever since. They're now regional in most of the northeastern states. If you ever look up Prickly, they have no problem with me telling this story, so you should check them out. In any case, it's good to know and good to revisit this on a regular basis. It sounds like something you do at the very beginning. Those of us that have been in the industry for any length of time know that we do this about every year. Go back through and redefine our personas on who's actually consuming and what their consumer experience is with the product. All right. That's all well and good from the fluffy side of things, but what does that boil down into in a formulation? What you want to look at is how your nutritionals stack up against your competition to make sure that you're reinforcing that niche that you've defined for yourself, that you've got flavor profiles that not only match what currently is in the market, but is perhaps a value add because at the end of the day, it's not good enough to just be as good as your competition. You have to be better. Two reasons you have to be better. One, you have to convince the consumer that they need to change their habits for a reason, but you also need to convince them often, because we are smaller, we have higher price points. We need to convince them to spend more money. So not only do we have to overcome more cost, but we also have to overcome I won't say laziness, but a lack of desire to change. Now, you have some consumers that will be opposed to that, and they just want to change for the sake of changing. Cool, great. You'll find that mostly in the e-com sector, where they will want to change just for the sake of change. It is really critical to look at texture. I know some people can overlook this, especially texture when you get to a manufacturing scale can drift, but make sure that that's still centered on what your target consumer wants out of your product. When it comes to ingredients, make sure you know what it is you want from a certification basis or from a descriptor basis, whether it's clean label that you're niching or whatever. When you're kind of building things, you'll mock up images for packaging. As you're building new packaging, you'll probably just end up with drawings. As you mock things up, you can usually source materials with printed images on it and get pretty close pretty fast. All of that kind of goes into defining your product, but also you want to make sure that your brand is aligned with your product's goals. So as you define some of these elements, you may really want to have a brand that is all about organic, but your target consumer has no interest in spending the extra money that it takes to make your product organic. And there is an extra cost associated with making your product organic. Know who you're marketing to and why those things are important. That becomes the essence of why you should define the brand the way that you are. Then being able to communicate that very quickly on label becomes the next challenge, but that's a problem all of its own. If you want to have 45 certifications, I will tell you your product will cost you $10 a unit, which may be, and if $10 doesn't scare you, then $20, because 45 certifications are really expensive to get and maintain. So just be tactical. For example, you don't need non-GMO and organic, because organic by definition is non-GMO. So be tactical about which claims you go after. If you are building your product for the first time, which is what I kind of allude to here, you want to build a gold standard, show what that is, demonstrate it, demonstrate elements of it that you like, that you don't like, be descriptive, and all of that will go forward into making sure that your production solution, whether that be your internal team or your external contract manufacturer, that they are able to understand what makes your product your product. Without that, without building specifications, then you have that issue that people concern themselves with about eroding quality with a contract manufacturer. Your contract manufacturer is held to the specifications. If you can't specify what it is that makes your product unique, then they will make a generic product. Specification, definition, and including those in your contract are critical to making sure that they only make what they're supposed to make. And if they make something wrong, well, great, it's not your product, you're not paying for it, and so they have to go back and remake it again. I have run into this, unfortunately, with grass ingredients. The grass definition is changing, sort of. It's generally regarded as safe. It's a structure that was put together in the 1970s, but I had a client that was trying to launch a yogurt into Walmart, and they were actually having the pitch on Friday, and I called them up on Wednesday and said, hey, what's up with this ingredient? And so basically we went through and determined that they were sourcing it from some guy on eBay because it was not something that they could source industrially, because it turns out it was not a safe ingredient. They were putting a unsafe ingredient in there, and I was like, why isn't this on your label? And they said, well, we were told we shouldn't put it on there. Turns out they had worked with a product developer that was not clear that this is not something that they should put in, and so I lost it on them. They were already in 100 stores, and I said, listen, you go out to your plant right now as the owner, and you take every bit of this ingredient and you lock it in your trunk, and you don't let anybody near it ever again. And you take it off of every documentation you have, and I'm not calling the FDA in the next 15 minutes. And sure enough, he did it. He was not happy I pulled him out of a board meeting, but that was what he needed to do. And he needed to do it right then and there. Did a safety analysis on it. It was fine, but like at the same time, it wasn't a safe ingredient. So follow the regulations. Anyway, so make sure you use industrially sourced ingredients. It is important, especially as you're looking at shipping over state lines. I say that specifically in that if you transport product over state lines, you are subject to interstate commerce, which means you are subject to federal law, aka FDA and USDA's oversight, which means if you are not using industrially sourced ingredients that comply with FSMA requirements, you are not in compliance technically in the case of federal law and being able to make sure that your ingredients are traceable all the way back to where they need to be. So use industrially sourced ingredients whenever possible, and when not possible, figure out how you're going to get to that point, because you will have to get to that point. And if you have an e-com business, keep it to your own state if you're only state certified. All right. More on ingredient selection. Make sure that the functional needs actually meet what you're trying to do. So if you've defined a texture a certain way based on a certain ingredient that you've been using in your gold standard, I will tell you that there's likely 100 different ingredients on an industrial level for that particular ingredient that you're buying off the shelf. So when you say, hey, I want to use cornstarch, I will tell you that there are over 3,000 different types of cornstarch out there. Modify it in different forms and ways and things like that around specific textural and functional needs, aka viscosity or structure or mouthfeel. So there's a lot of different things out there. Take the time that it takes to figure out the right ones, and just know that that might change over time. There might be a better one that comes out later. So ongoing sort of annual touch-ups with your products, especially when you're small, it's not a bad idea to every once a year just kind of break things open, fish around for some other ingredients that might be maybe a better cost or maybe a better functionality that you could like. I've actually seen things that were double the cost but 5x the functionality, and so people flipped over to them and they dropped their cogs by a couple of pennies or as much as a dime. So it's worth it to kind of every so often touch base on that, especially as you get to certain volumes, reevaluate your supply chain. When you're small, probably on an annual basis, just because it takes a lot of time to do that, and you don't have a lot of extra time to put into it. As over time, you'll hire somebody and kind of that R&D supply chain role that can help you with that. Okay, sorry, water break. Then you want to iterate on the product formulation, obviously, as you're bringing in new ingredients and swapping things out and stuff like that, making sure that not only that you can develop that texture and flavor specifically, which can sometimes be through separate ingredients, but also making sure that that's still true to your gold standard and to your brand. So making sure that if you said, hey, we don't use gums, you don't include a xanthan gum because consumers aren't going to like that. Okay. And when it comes to scaling this up, the manufacturing processes might actually not only change how you want to build this product, because you may have to use less of one thing or more of another thing. For example, you often have to use less emulsifier when you're going to an industrial process, because the ability to mill that oil-water barrier down to a very small size is easy on an industrial level, but it's very difficult on a benchtop level to build that particle size distribution to make a stable emulsion. In any case, you can often drop the amount of emulsifier. So as you scale things up, just know that you'll have some minor tweaks that need to go into this, as well as you look at your product over the shelf life, you may decide that, hey, it does last for 12 months, but I really don't like the taste of it after 9 months. Well, mark your shelf life as 9 months and then figure out how to extend the flavor to that 12-month mark. So it's a constant kind of iteration as you change parts of your upstream process that your product is necessarily going to be impacted by that. All right. I didn't give any instructions, so I probably don't have any questions yet. But as you have questions, please either drop them in chat, which I think, nope, nobody's done yet. And I'll pause at these kind of elements along the way. And if you really need to kind of like interrupt me, just throw up a hand, and I think I can see it that way. So, but yeah, there will be hopefully some time for some questions at the end here as well. So if you don't drop them in the chat, keep them and we'll chat at the end. But I want to make sure I get to everybody's questions. And it's a good thing this is recorded so that everybody can go back and watch it again, because I'm talking very quickly, I'm realizing. I did grow up in Marietta, so talking quickly is not natural to me. Okay. All right, so packaging. On a basic level, there are 4 types of packaging. The primary packaging is the packaging that touches the product itself, right? So that's the structure that physically touches it. The secondary packaging is sometimes included in the primary packaging, which makes this confusing, but oftentimes it's not. If you've got a label that you're putting on your primary packaging, that is your secondary packaging. This is going to be the thing the layer that is consumer focused, right? So it's what the consumer is going to see and engage with. Sometimes that's a bundle. So if you see multi-packs out there, they've got a color-coded sort of overwrap bundle that has some other writing and things like that on it. That would be secondary packaging. The primary packaging is the packaging that's actually touching the physical product. There's a bunch of different reasons why secondary packaging can exist, from structural to consumer-facing to all sorts of reasons, but that is not the material that your distributor is physically going to see or touch. Your distributor is going to see and touch the tertiary packaging. It's also called the corrugate. Corrugate is short for corrugated cardboard, often called the case. This is kind of the sellable unit at a distributor level, which means that the case and the label for the case are all tertiary packaging. The reason why this is important is to make sure that as you are rolling up your COGS for an individual unit, you have all of your different packaging levels accounted for in your COGS calculation. You don't know what COGS is? That's cost of goods sold. It's a primary way of understanding effectively not only your bill of materials, so all the things that go into it, from raw ingredients and raw packaging, to inclusive of your cost associated with converting those into your actual product. Getting back to this, quaternary packaging is the materials necessary to stack things up into a pallet. So that's not just your pallet, the wood itself, but it's also the stretch wrap. If you've got any layer sheets or banding or various other things, all of these, or overcaps, there's a lot of different things that can be added on, but you want to make sure that those are accounted for in your packaging. All of these things have a structural, functional purpose of preserving your product and realistically, your secondary packaging all the way to the point of consumer engagement, which, if it's a retail shelf, is all the way to that retail shelf. Ideally, that primary packaging will keep your product safe to the point of consumption. Again, this is kind of philosophy of packaging, but it matters as we stack up and say, well, what is the right packaging for my product? There's just a lot of structural elements to discuss before we start talking about what type of form factor does a consumer want to engage with, whether it's a spouted pouch for ketchup or a squeezable tube. There's a lot of different ways of looking at things. All right, purposes of packaging. The primary purposes of packaging is to preserve our product. The primary things trying to destroy it are oxygen, moisture, and light. Oxygen often tries to get in there and oxidize our product. If we have any fat whatsoever in there, it will eventually oxidize that fat and turn it rancid. To offset that, we'll use modified atmosphere packaging, so displacing the air inside there with nitrogen or CO2 or a mixture of the two. In some cases, you actually want oxygen in there, but that's usually when you have live vegetables in there and stories and things like that. But yes, the basic idea is that you want to have isolating the oxygen. Now, if you go ahead and put a scavenger in there, which is those little silica packets, and you modify the atmosphere, and you use a pore barrier for oxygen, none of the other two things that you've done are going to matter because the oxygen is still going to get in there. You want to make sure you know the OTR, oxygen transmission rate, of your actual packaging to make sure that it's going to serve the purposes for the length of time that you're trying to preserve the product. That's a lot. Listen to that again later. Moisture. We often use desiccants. If you look at beef jerky, it's always got a desiccant packet in there. So we've got a scavenger packet, and in some cases where for oxygen, we'll use a desiccant. For moisture, they make combo units. You can buy them on Uline. But the real thing we're trying to control is the water activity at every point inside the package. So water activity is the amount of available water for basically bacterial reproduction, aka if it can pull water into its cell, it can digest your food and then make more of itself, which makes either mold or it makes pathogens. It can also make spoilage organisms, but we worry a little bit less about that. Water activity is something that if you've not gotten your product tested before, you should absolutely do it unless you happen to know that it is perfectly fine, like, I don't know, potato chips. But water activity is not the moisture content. It is a separate measure, and it independently looks at basically the osmotic pressure of your product. For example, juice should not be shelf stable, but it is when we pull so much sugar into it that the osmotic pressure, or the amount of water that the sugar is pulling into itself, doesn't allow the bacteria to pull the water into itself to replicate. So there may be a small amount of bacteria floating around in there, but because it can't pull any water in, it can't replicate itself. It can't build enough to become an infectious dose. Way more depth than you need to know about water activity right now, but more that is the subject of many hundreds of people's worth of research over the years. So good to kind of know. If you're below a 0.6, as a general rule, you're fine. If you're below 0.8, you're probably fine. If you're above a 0.8, you likely have issues, and you need to look at either mold inhibitors if you're below 0.83. And if you're above 0.9, you need to have some sort of sterilization step in the whole thing, which you probably know at this point. When it comes to light, you often get color degradation, flavor degradation. You'll get occasional light-driven oxidation, things like that. Chelators can be helpful in that, but we'll move past that. Light's easy to protect from. You can put a foil layer in there and it'll protect from light all day long, depending on what type of flexible or non-flexible product you might be making or packaging. Okay. I will make this comment here about sustainability. If you're looking for compostable packaging that needs to protect your product from oxygen, light, and moisture, and you need it to break down in the presence of oxygen, light, moisture, and heat, that is a challenge from a theoretical level on how to find compostable packaging for your product. So make sure that you understand what it is you're asking for. There are some people working in this area that are really triggering on that heat element. to kind of force the packaging to break down. I'll tell you, it's insanely expensive at the moment, but it's coming down quickly. Give it another 3 to 5 years. All right. When you're looking to scale your process, which is really what we're here to talk about, you want to look at a process flow diagram. So every way in which you need to manipulate your ingredients and your packaging in order to get things together. You start by laying out what you've got on what you're doing on the bench, right? So when I say bench, I mean in your kitchen or wherever you happen to be. Lay out every small step. So if that means that you're having to dice onions, dicing onions is multiple steps, right? You got to cut open an onion, got to pull off the excess, you've got to dice all the different things one direction, then kind of transbend it and dice it the other way. There's a lot of different steps in that. There are ways that we can make that simpler, but we'll get into that in just a second. So you want to write down every single step in little boxes. I'm an engineer, I get it. We make little boxes and we draw arrows between them to show all the different steps in order. The reason why you do that is so that you can draw a circle around multiple steps and say, this machine will do all of these steps at the same time. It's hard to first get to the point where you can do this very well because one person may be doing 8 different steps at a time. But if you line them all out, it makes it easier to kind of see. The next thing we do when we're scaling things is, we start to group those things together. We look at how competitive products are doing this. I'll tell you the simplest way to do this is to look on YouTube how it's made and your product category and see if they've got anything out there. It's a nice little program that'll tell you a lot about how large manufacturers are doing things that you are looking to do. That may mean that there's a small version of that process that's available out there. But we can start by kind of learning how they do it and how we would need to necessarily follow. The next thing you do is you take that process flow diagram with those circled areas and you say, hey, can you just tell me if this is if I'm on the right track? I'll tell you, most professionals in this space will just do that for free. They'll just look at you and say, yeah, that looks right. Or, oh my gosh, you don't know about this. This one machine will take care of these 15 steps all at once. And there's a small version of it that's a benchtop model that costs like $3,000. Here's the name of the person who sells it. Go give them a call, right? That would be great information to have before you beat your head against the wall trying to figure out how to scale something up. So when we're starting, that's how we start. We then look at what is a mass balance. So this is an engineering term that basically means that we're going to look at how much product can a particular process do, and then look at all the other processes that it's connected to, even if that's a person doing a simple operation. We want to look at what is the limit of how much they can do in a minute or an hour or a shift, right? There is a limit to everything. And we want to start to lay that out. In this case, as I was mentioning here, looking at year 2 estimated volumes, that sets us up for success with a contract manufacturer down the line, which we will get to in just a minute. But the idea is that you want to look at kind of how much needs to get done in a day, running 1 to 2 days a month, for kind of designing up what your ideal process looks like for working with a contract manufacturer. So when you are going to call a contract manufacturer, I will get into this in a minute, but you're going to talk to them about where you want to be, not necessarily where you are. The reason why you want to talk to them about where you want to be is to make sure that that's a good fit, because if that's not a good fit for where you want to be in 2 years, then it's not worth the time and energy for them to engage. What I mean by that is any contract manufacturer that's engaging is looking at a minimum 2-year engagement because they don't make any money off of you in the first year, realistically. Not so much from an MOQ perspective, but just simply from a tolling perspective. They will average out the onboarding costs over the course of that first year so that they break even. I'll get into more of that in a minute, but just kind of that's why we're looking this far out. Also, if you're going to build a facility, you don't want to build it for where you're at today. You want to build it for where you're going to be in 2 years, just as a rule of thumb. All right. This is where the rubber meets the road on scaling. Surface area to volume ratio. This is a concept that is sometimes challenging, but when you think about, let's say a small cube of something and a large cube of something, right? The surface area of the large cube is big, but it doesn't scale as quickly as the volume does for that small version. So what I mean by that is very tiny particles of things have a lot of surface area for the amount of volume that they have. All of your processes, your heating, your fermentation, your cooling, and all those things happen on the surfaces. They don't happen in the middle of things. The exception is a little bit microwave, but even then, it technically still happens at the surface first, and then kind of there's binodal distributions that take place and all this other stuff. So anyway, because of that, small scale processes don't always have a direct corollary to their large scale, but sometimes they are combined in other things or there's different techniques. Let me take one example. A lot of people will start by putting things into a blender. A blender only has a cutting surface at the very bottom, and it is based on the tip speed of the blades that are traveling. That's how the cutting actually physically takes place. It is driven by a motor that sits below outside of the blender. When you go to scale this, the unfortunate fact is in order to get the tip speeds where they need to be, in order to generate the same level of cutting, when you double the volume of your container, you take your horsepower required and you take it to the eighth power. Or sorry, not to the eighth power, to the eighth, you multiply it by 8, so it's 2 to the third power. Your doubling of volume leads to a octupling of power necessary, so it is increasing your horsepower of your motor substantially. There is a limit to how big this gets because the motor will be bigger than your actual chamber at some point. Usually it's about 100 gallons. Anything larger than that, and they literally just don't make that because the motors are far more expensive than anything else going on. And so nobody's ever found a value in doing so. Instead of milling inside of a single chamber, what we end up doing is we take the milling operation out of the chamber and we put it in a pipe. And so in doing that, we are able to take the elements that are going in, we'll put them into a pipe, pump them into this mill, and for some operations, we'll take them and recirculate them if we just want a general kind of chopping. But then when we decide to push it forward to the filling line, we will still keep it going, but we will not recirculate it back into the tank. We will push it through the mill on the way to the filler, which means every particle of every single bit of that vessel has been milled to a certain level. And there are really powerful machines. I've saved millions of dollars with these things. Actually, yeah, lots of millions of dollars putting in these sorts of milling machines. This is one example of just how we have different techniques when we go to the larger scale without having to increase the power that's necessary to do so and things like that. So lots of people have been working on this for a long time. There's likely a solution out there for you if you say your product just doesn't scale. It could be that you're thinking of your product as the thing instead of as what it is mimicking. For example, egg patties that you buy that are plant-based, right? In order to open up their structure and give them that fluffy feel that an egg has, you have to add a leavening agent. And what I mean by that is baking powder, for example, right? You heat that up and it generates little air bubbles, and that's how you fluff it up. Well, the problem that I had at a very large plant-based egg company was figuring out how to get them to make egg patties when none of the egg producers would work with us because they were already making egg patties. And so I looked at them and I was like, that's silly. Why would you want an egg place to make egg patties, plant-based egg patties? This is a flatbread, right? This is just a flatbread that we just dyed yellow effectively, right? Let's go call up a bakery that would be happy to take this on. And sure enough, they were like, yeah, sure. We'll do it on sheet pans all day long. We'll make a couple 100,000 of them a month, and away we went. So that's how one particular egg patty scaled throughout the country was literally just reimagining what the product actually was functioning as because of the novelty that we built into it in the formulation. So, anyway, um, that's a lot. Same thing applies to heating. You get burn on when you try to crank up the temperature too high on a dairy product, and so on and so forth. There's other non-thermal processes out there that I could talk about, but I don't think we necessarily need to go into. Um, and Oh, there's one other thing, right? As you scale from benchtop, where you may have, let's say, 38 ingredients, which is fine, and they're all of different amounts and things like that, as you go and multiply that by 1,000 pounds and scale that up, you need to be conscientious of what the ingredients will be arriving at a larger facility, what they will be packaged in. No one likes opening 1,000 3-ounce spice containers because we need 3,000 ounces. Um, we'd rather just get that in one big bag that we can kind of dispense and things like that. So keep in mind what your larger volume ingredient handling is going to be looking at because that will come into play in working with your contract manufacturer. Let's see here. I'm going to check my questions here. In general, what does it mean, gold standard? Gold standard is something that, let's say, it is the best manifestation of your product that you can come up with, but you can't make it on a large scale. And so you can say, hey, this is my best version of it, but I don't know that it scales. Or this is my best version of it. I don't know how to package it for shelf life, things like that. It is kind of an intermediate step on defining what is the right go-to-market product that necessarily isn't scaled yet. So gold standard is what we measure our performance with our downstream processing to see how close we can get back to that gold standard. Now, if we say our gold standard is by definition what we want the consumer to experience and no deviation whatsoever, that'll be challenging to hit. But if there's a little bit of deviation in, let's say, color or a little deviation in, mouthfeel or whatever the nasal thing is, retronasal flavor experience and things like that. So there's a lot of different things where you could say, well, I've got a little bit of tolerance here and a little bit of tolerance here, but I really want you to get as close to the gold standard as possible. Cool, great. Then they'll go and try to do that. But what we have to look at is not just when we're comparing back to the gold standard, we'll look at the product as it comes off the line, absolutely. What we want to do is also keep the product into the end of shelf life. So whatever we have defined as shelf life, by the way, you define the end of shelf life, assuming there's not a food safety issue. But you define the end of shelf life. You want to experience that end of shelf life product, which, if it's a 12-month product, you got to put it up on a shelf for 12 months and wait. But you want to try that product compared to your gold standard, because that is how far you've drifted in your not only production, but your production and shelf life. So just something to keep in mind as you are looking through that. All right. Let's do this. Anybody that is self-manufacturing or planning on self-manufacturing and building a plant and things like that into the future, raise your hand. I see one. Otherwise, put it into the chat and things like that. I want to know what kind of where our best time is spent on contract manufacturing or self-manufacturing, or people are halfway between the decision point of one versus the other, or think that, getting a couple $1,000,000 together to scale their facility may not be the best use of time. Okay. All right. So a handful of folks are self, handful of folks are probably contract manufacturing. Let me run through what contract manufacturing is to demystify. That way, each of you as a business owner can actually make the decision for yourself fully informed on what contract manufacturing is, because there's a lot of bad information out there. I'll specifically call out one book in particular that is full of exceptional stories that are not the norm, and that is Conman versus Coman. It scares a lot of people into paying people to find them Comans. It's not. You don't need to go down that route. It's not as scary as people make it out to be. All right. So I've used a lot of terms already. Coman means contract manufacturer. Co-packer means a contract packager. They mean different things. The food industry doesn't care. We're bad at literally just um, uh, using the right term for things. So we use them synonymously. What gets used depends on what part of the country you're in. Um, I've also heard CMO used on the West Coast. It's really annoying because that acronym just bugs me. Um, but anyway, so they're basically manufacturers with equipment. They have the certifications, they have the people and the know-how to make certain types of products. Um, Obviously, capabilities and capacity will wildly vary from command to command. So um, that's the very quick and dirty definition. They have plants. They are running existing products. They leverage economies of scale to deliver a lower cost overall. Um, the term MOQ, or minimum order quantity, is basically a made-up number that they've decided on where the break-even point is for running their line. Um, there's a certain amount that gets sacrificed due to pipe loss. There's a certain amount of product that gets lost due to things like pipe loss or startup getting the machines calibrated and things like that. Mixing vessels have minimum volumes, things like that. All of those things kind of go into this MOQ calculation. I will say most places that have an MOQ have a way around that MOQ, and it's the way around it is money. So I can get into that in a second, but you're going to end up paying for a shift. It doesn't matter how much product you make, but you always end up paying for a shift because there are costs that they have inherent in their system. And for some folks, I found that this is helpful. When working with a command, they normally operate on, you give them a forecast, eventually you give them a PO around a certain amount of volume. The forecast helps them plan, the PO helps them kind of execute. They run production, they'll invoice you for the product. There's usually either a progress or an in full payment that takes place, and then they ship out. That's generally the cadence. Some folks didn't know what PO stands for. It's a purchase order. So that's where you basically say, go make this, I'm going to pay you this amount of money, it's set aside in my budget type of thing. All right. The physical plants that are run by commands or anybody are often certified by whatever the appropriate body is, whether that's the FDA, USDA, state, local government, organic, gluten-free. All of these things have different physical bodies that certify their facilities. If you haven't heard of SQF, BRC, or ISO, this is the definition of third-party audit. So if any of your distributors or retailers require a third-party audit, these are your three options. I will tell you there's really only one option because ISO is only really used in Europe. I've found 3 facilities in the US that use ISO. BRC was pushed out by Walmart a while ago and then they gave up on it. SQF is what's used in over 70% of the US manufacturing facilities out there that submit themselves to a third-party audit. SQF is simply a program. There's an entire another webinar I've got out there just on SQF and how to operate within it. The short answer is it is very challenging to get on your own facility unless you are dedicated and have a dedicated person on your quality team. There are some rules around that and different other programs that SQF has developed around making it easier for small brands to engage in a pseudo third-party audit. We'll leave it at that. Ask me more if you want more information later. If your command does not have a particular certification or your facility does not have a particular certification, it can be over 100 hours just to get a new one. So walking in and saying, hey, you're not gluten-free, but you can do everything else in my product, and saying, hey, can you make your facility GFCO, which is gluten-free certified operation or something? I don't know. Organization. I think it's a organizational certification. But anyway, that is basically a non-starter because in order to make a line GFCO, you basically have to convince the workers not to have a sandwich at lunch that involves gluten. It's that level of gluten control. So there's other kind of workarounds there. I can get into it later. Also, when it comes to commands, the basic dividing line of IP, because this comes up from time to time, the intellectual property of your product should always remain in your own control. Never give it up to a co-man. Never let them say, hey, we're going to take control of your formula. No. You can authorize changes to your own formula, but any changes that you authorize are necessarily part of your own IP. Any IP that is about how the product works on a piece of equipment must remain theirs. Otherwise, you'll find it very difficult to work with a co-man because how to run a piece of equipment should remain their intellectual property. So, if you want to know where the standard dividing line is, it is there. People put all sorts of things in contracts and then negotiate them out or piss each other off and don't get a deal. So, just kind of keep that in mind. Co-mans make money based on how much product they produce and sell to brands that they then sell. They want to make product that meets your specification. If you cannot sell it because they didn't build to a specification that you provided, then it is not to their benefit to even turn on their machines that day. Their goal in life is to make product for people to sell. They don't want to develop your product. They don't want to make unsafe or inconsistent products. They want to make something that you can sell. They also don't want to make the product and hold on to it. That's not part of their business model. Because while they want to make your product, they want to make everyone else's product too. So keeping in mind that they have other operations going on that necessarily are going to want to feed into their business model around, they're going to spend an entire day just on your product. And then they're going to shut down, clean up, reset, and build an entire new day on somebody else's product. Their goal in life is to be efficient in making the product that you can go sell. That is the purpose. But that means efficiency is a much stronger chord to strike with them than anything else. Because the more efficient they are, the more money they make. Pure and simple. Partnering with the co-mans to help them understand their processes so that you can understand how your product or product description or product ingredients and things like that can support the streamlining of the running of their facility will help you build a good relationship. For example, that the 1,000 containers of 3-ounce spice that had to be opened, that was a big problem for a particular client of mine who said that we had to source that particular spice. So we just called up the people who made that spice and said, can you just put it into a big, super sack for us? And they said, sure, we've already got it. It's ready to ship out. Nobody's ever asked us for it. The guy was buying literally pallets of these little tiny containers that they would have to staff 8 people to open the day before in order to make enough ingredient to actually run their production. So they had to pay 8 people's full-time rate in addition to the other rates they had to pay in order to make their product. So the more you can align to helping the co-man run efficiently, the better off your relationship will be. All right. I get often asked, do I need a contract? Yes. Let's just say you need a contract with a co-man. There are some co-mans that will tell you, oh, yeah, we don't do contracts, we just work on PO. Yeah, that's not really allowed by FSMA anymore. That used to be the case, and as FSMA has kind of rolled through in the last decade or so, you can't really run that way anymore legally and be federally compliant. So, no, you can't run off a PO. You can for an order or two, right? As you're getting things signed and things like that, sure, it's okay. Just be careful you know that you're doing a cash and carry relationship. If they didn't meet your specifications, you have no recourse. They can give you literally anything and say, oh yeah, it's paid, it's full. And once you've kind of paid that off, you have no leverage whatsoever. This is why operating on a PO is a bad idea. I would love to tell you that there are standard terms or a standard agreement out there that you can use. There's not. I have worked with hundreds of co-man agreements. They are all over the map. There's some like general rules of thumb that I've kind of propagated into the industry, but realistically, there are no standard terms. There's no standard percentages or anything like that. That said, gross margin on your operation should be, their gross margin should be somewhere between 8 and 25%. The smaller you are, the larger the percentage. There are some groups that push people below 8%. Those are like the Kraft Heinz and things like that of the world. I'm not even going to talk about them. They're jerks. But um, you want to make sure that it's got some basic framework around making sure that they are meeting local laws. You understand what the information flow and the cash flow looks like, as well as what documentation you are required to submit, from a purchase order to shipment receipts or whatever the case may be. Um, who's sourcing each component, not just who's sourcing ingredients in general, but who's sourcing each and every component, and what the list of available sources that they're allowed to source from is. How recalls work. You want them to be a part of recalls. You can't just have they frankly under FSMA can't say that we're just not a part of recalls, which I've seen in some contracts, and I'm like, you can't do that. Um, you want to know how much things are going to cost. That will be the last thing that gets populated, probably after you've already negotiated terms. That's just the nature of negotiating these agreements, and make sure that you own your own IP at the end of the day, both your branding and your ingredient formulation and sourcing. Um, so when you start off, MOQ orders may very well lead to a negative gross margin, which means you're on a lit fuse, right? You have a set amount of time available to you to get through not only that order, but reorders and things like that, in order to allow you to grow volume and distribution in such a way that you can generate enough cash to overcome that negative margin. It's important for both the brand and the co-man to understand that that is where you're headed. Otherwise, they're investing their time and energy into a program that's not going to go anywhere, right? They don't like doing that. They want to make sure that you have a path to profitability in the future in order to make sure that it is worth the time to bring you on board. That means getting all of your elements cleared through their regulatory and quality hurdles that they have to do on the back end, that they're really bad at communicating that they have to do. So it often seems like you just bring ingredients, drop it off, and they give you product back. It's a lot more complicated than that. All right. Pausing here real quick. I'm going to give you kind of the step-by-step play guide on how to engage partners, and I'm going to do it very quickly because I'm almost out of time, and I apologize for how quickly I've had to move, but such is life. All right. There are over 10,000 food co-mans in the U.S. No one will give you an accurate number out there that I found ever. Websites, databases, most of them have not been updated in 3 to 5 years, but the co-mans, they change what their capabilities are every 6 to 9 months. They buy new equipment based on how much loading they've got. They sell off old equipment. If they haven't been updated in 6 to 9 months, then it's garbage. That database may not be able to help you at all, but doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Over half of them don't have a website. That's even true still today. Many of them don't believe in, well, this is less and less the case, but many of them don't believe in email, or may use a AOL.com or Yahoo.com for their professional contract manufacturing facility. I wish that was not the case, but that's where we are in the state of America right now. Some of them have a phone number. Some of them don't, because they don't want to have to pay the receptionist. But many of them will hear from multiple groups a week. So you want to be quick and concise. I will say, unfortunately, a lot of the successful projects out there come from somebody in the industry referring people to individual commands. I wish I could tell you that searches out there, that you didn't have to pay for this search. Try it, see if you can get by without it, but just know that you may have to pay for finding the right command, unfortunately. I will say, starting off, don't worry about geography. I know a lot of people will tell you the otherwise, but the cost of having the right command is much cheaper than having the wrong command in the right geography. And you can pay for that fuel cost, that transportation logistics difference, easily in the free support that you get from your contract manufacturer. Super easily. And if anybody turns you down and says, yeah, we're not going to do that, ask them if they know anybody who will. A lot of the times that professional reference is other commands referring other commands to commands, to be able to find the right home for you. We all kind of know each other in the food industry. So I wish I could tell you that's not true, but we do kind of all know each other, and you'll find that out as you get into this more and more. When you are initially contacting them, be concise. This is going to be a 5-minute conversation at first. You want to be very quick in your discussion. I'm making a potted plant or something, potted yogurt. I need help manufacturing it. My primary formulation is complete, but we'll probably need to adapt as we scale. The process specifications are developed, my packaging's defined, my volume targets in 2 years are to be 100,000 units a month, my desired certifications are organic. Then pause. Let them respond. Yeah, we don't make yogurt here. Okay, great. Do you know anybody who does? And they will give you a list of 3 names. Great. Move on to them. They say, oh, yeah, that sounds attractive. Let me get you in front of the salesperson, right? That salesperson might be, out traveling and out on the golf course or whatever, or he might be literally right available. Repeat that exact same thing to the salesperson, and then set up a time to have a video call with them. Be honest if you're on the market or not. And if you're in the market, how far distributed are you? What are your current volumes? We've already mentioned our volume targets, but they're going to ask you some of these questions. What type of consumer are you looking to target? How much are you willing to run at a time? And what's your shelf life? Listen to what they do with the information that you give them. It is not all about you talking nonstop about your brand identity and things like that. That is not your initial contact goal. So take notes and then send them an NDA, because you don't want to give them any more information than on this slide without an NDA. They will be used to this. If you don't present them with an NDA and you start talking about go-to-market strategies and things like that, they will mark you down as not being as legit. So, second contact, and I'll go through this very quickly. You'll go into more detail. It's usually half an hour. You'll want videos of your bench process of how you're doing things, if that's where you're scaling from. You'll want samples and things like that. Send it ahead of the meeting where you can so that they can review it. They'll pull a larger team together to support the next discussion. And the goal of this will be to present some of your marketing analysis and all this to make sure that you are a legit company to work with, and also ask for what would be helpful in evaluating their kind of activation strategy on their end. Provide that after the meeting, but also they're going to talk about trials. That can be anywhere from 0 to 20K. Just know that that's going to be an implied cost. I'm almost done, Aubrey, I promise. Which is good because I got another meeting to go to next. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, generate that documentation list to make time for that for those trials. In those trials, know that you will not necessarily be making product. You will be sampling, trying out their equipment with your materials. That is what the purpose of an initial trial is. You may not have anything that actually is sellable. You may have something that you can give away, but I wouldn't count on any sort of production. And you may have to send all of your ingredients and packaging together on consolidated pallets to make it easier to store in their facility. You don't want to arrive one bag at a time type of thing. There's a lot of documentation that goes along with it. You can check that out later. Develop a trial plan, expect failed product, expect inefficiency. They're not going to run their lines at the right speeds. And a second or third trial might be necessary to kind of make them comfortable to run your product. There's an iterative pattern around contract negotiations. An expert is somebody who you want to have explain this. Sometimes it's a lawyer. Most of the time it's not. Most of the lawyers out there don't know anything about manufacturing agreements in the food industry. So cool. Get just an expert to look over it. It takes an hour or two just to kind of mark it up so that your lawyer is more functional in their negotiations with you. If you don't know anybody, send it to me. I'll do it too. Yeah, at the end of the day, there's a cost basis categories. I'd love to go over this. It's direct labor and indirect labor, utilities, maintenance, facility, gross profit. It's basically all about depreciation of the facility. But I'll have to do that some other time because I'm out of time. And there's a whole other section in here. I have a whole bunch of plugs about where you might be in your journey at the moment. Start with the LinkedIn lower left-hand corner. If Food Finance Institute, which is a mostly free program, is interested in, if you're interested in learning more, then you can go there. If you need actionable support, I'd go to Catapult. And if you're interested in just learning about building communities in the food and beverage space, hit me up on Naturally Wisconsin. So, um, like I said, wear a lot of hats, know a lot of stuff, but this deck's coming to you so you can kind of go through it. And I apologize for running over on time.
You are okay. I will tell you, we got one question.
Hmm.
A lot of people would like to know if they can contact you. Uh,
Yes, absolutely.
that's awesome. And so, everybody, I hope you can see the contact information there. But we want to say thank you so much, Jamie. This was great. We really do appreciate your time here today.
Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to get to questions. I love going through questions in this. Um, yes, so yeah, I will head out to my next thing. But I really love this community. I'm a Georgia Tech grad, and I want to be supportive because if this organization had existed as when I was a student, I would have taken a different career path. And I think Aubrey, I've told you the exact same thing. So I am really happy that you guys are here, that you're up and running, and let me know how I can support you guys going forward. So um, with that, thank you very much for the opportunity. Hope you guys are doing great and stay safe out there.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Have a good one. Bye
Yep.
bye.
Take care.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.